Hey everybody, what is up out there in podcast land? Yes, it is your weekly hangover cure. It is the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0, episode 7 of 2023, dropping on February the 18th, taping here on the 16th. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Glad to have you aboard. Going solo this week because we talked about it on the regular Sports Frenzy episode this week. We gave you fair warning last week. Dave and I had a concert on a normal taping night. Alter Bridge, Mammoth, WVH, and Red. And that will be your feature review next week when the Conquistador rejoins me for the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. So, because this is kind of a weird, odd, transitional episode, I decided, as always, we start off with music, of course, but I decided maybe I should review some music that wouldn't normally fall in the purview of the Conquistador. So basically, I'm being selfish, looking into some music that pretty much me and me alone would listen to, like, dislike, but the type of music I would give more of a chance to than Dave would. So, first and foremost, let's start off with the first single off of the new Dave Matthews Band album. That song is Madman's Eyes. Of course, as always, the Dave Matthews Band going out on tour this summer. I'm contemplating whether or not to make a solo jaunt for their 2-night stand at Ruoff Music Center outside of Indianapolis in Noblesville, Indiana. But the first song off their brand new album is Madman's Eyes. Now, the beginning, the musical intro has kind of a Middle Eastern music feel to it. It's not the finest moment for DMB, but it's intriguing and it's still a lot more interesting, at least to me, than most of the other stuff out there. Dave Matthews singing basically in a falsetto for much of the song. Again, interesting first single, interesting lead-off track for this album, coming out here in about 2 or 3 months. I believe the title is Walking Around the Moon. And I've alluded to this in the past. Dave and I have fought and argued about this in the past. He hates the Dave Matthews Band. Dragging him to see them one time was like torture for him. So, again, an opportunity for me on this off week for the Conquistador to discuss some of these music artists, some of the songs that we wouldn't normally cover here on Sports Frenzy. So, Madman's Eyes, again, decent lead-off track, but not their best moment. I'd give it 2.5 frenzies. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, a band that has been around for quite a while. Another friend of mine got me into this band probably about a decade ago. has to be at least a decade. The Hold Steady. Now, the Hold Steady, they are an acquired taste. I will admit it. They have musically and a little bit lyrically, but mostly musically, a lot of similarities to Bruce Springsteen. At least to me, they do. Lead singer, songwriter Craig Finn likes to do stream of consciousness lyrics and sings the same way. Lots of pop culture references, lots of old school rock and roll references in his songs, which of course I love. But on the downside, after multiple albums, I think they've got 7 albums out by now at least. Their songs, the feel, it's all starting to sound the same. And unfortunately for their upcoming album, The Price of Progress, the lead-off track, Sideways Skull, is no different. This sounds like a carbon copy of pretty much almost every Hold Steady song you've heard over the last 7 or 8 years. If you have happened to, out there in podcast land, indulged in the Hold Steady like me. So that gives me a little bit of worry, a little bit of trepidation going into the new album. For once, because yes, I'm the guy who always says these bands should stick with the formula that works. That's what got them the massive success that they've enjoyed over the years and decades. But in the case of the Hold Steady have got to break out of the mold a little bit and figure out something different. Get themselves out there. Get themselves some radio airplay. Figure out a way to not be this stream of consciousness, Bruce Springsteen, pop culture reference band. So Sideways Skull only gets 2 frenzies from the Maestro. And then finally, Peter Gabriel, who has been out of the limelight for a long, long time, is coming out with a new album. Don't know how to pronounce it. I guess the best shot I can take at it is I/O. And of course, being the weirdo that he is, he's releasing one new track every full moon. So there's got to be a theme. And the other evidence I have of that is that every song he has been releasing, he's got 2 out right now. We're going to review the first. Every song he puts out has a dark side and a bright side mix. Of course, you get it, dark side of the moon. If you've got more than 2 brain cells, you can probably figure out the theme, the pattern that Peter Gabriel is going with here. But the first song off his upcoming album, I/O, is Panopticon. I didn't find much of a difference between the dark side and the bright side mix. The song itself is okay. It's not bad. I think Peter Gabriel made his money back with In Your Eyes and Sledgehammer, with the album So now he's got his artistic freedom back, like he had dressing up as a flower with Genesis in the 70s. So he can pretty much do whatever he wants, record when he wants, Panopticon is actually it's not crazy, nutsy, cuckoo out there. It's actually fairly accessible. Don't get me wrong, it's not any type of a song that would be a top 40 hit, especially nowadays, but even back in the 80s, I don't think it would have been a hit. But it's not bad. I'll give this one 2 frenzies. So there you go. How about that? I get 3 songs, personal preference songs that I normally would not review on Sports Frenzy, and they're all kind of mediocre. So what does that say about my taste in music? Well, it's awesome, it's brilliant, but you guys already know that. All right, moving on. Have to discuss, of course, the Super Bowl halftime show. We're not going to talk about Rihanna that much. Not my type of music, not the type of music we review here on Sports Frenzy, obviously. Did find it kind of interesting that while 113 million people watched the Super Bowl, the halftime show actually drew almost 119 million viewers. See, now I would have thought the number would go down. Personally, I have not watched a halftime show since they decided to banish classic rock. Now, I did have it on the TV, but I had the volume off. I was working on my food at halftime, some wings, some jalapeno poppers. I would occasionally glance over and see what was going on the TV. And of course, Rihanna comes out in that red suit with the baby bump. And of course, she's got all the dancers around her, supposedly sperm, and some kind of grand statement about becoming pregnant again or sex or whatever. If you haven't figured out by now, Sports Frenzy 2.0 does not cater to the current culture. We're old school rock and roll. We want movies that are actually coherent and make sense, that clock in at 2 hours or less, have a little action in them, a little bit of clever humor. Don't necessarily have to have any kind of grand statement. And we like TV shows that actually are going to be on for more than 8 episodes. Now, the one cool thing in a classic rock vibe about the Rihanna show, which I guarantee if you have not listened to certain interviews leading up to the Super Bowl, do you know who the guitarist was? Because they did not show Rihanna's band very much during this halftime show, is my understanding. The guitarist for Rihanna, and it had to be a thrill for him, even though really he wasn't doing anything other than fake playing guitar, was Extreme's Nuno Betancourt. So it's cool, at least somehow, some way, in some sense, classic rock got its influence in there, got its 2 cents into the Super Bowl halftime show, much to the chagrin of Roger Goodell, who I'm sure was absolutely thrilled with Rihanna grabbing her crotch and then sniffing her fingers. But that's enough about that. Let's move on. We're going to double up here in segment one. We're going to do movies here, following right up on those 3 songs I reviewed in the music segment, because we're going to have a lot of TV and streaming in segment 2. And then, of course, segment 3 will be moments of silence and a handful of Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. So, again, flying solo with the movie review. I watched a movie on Paramount Plus that I've been meaning to watch for quite a while. Had it in my list, my queue, for probably a year. I believe it's about a year and a half old. One of the first original movies that premiered on Paramount Plus. I am a sucker. A fan of the found footage horror movies, going all the way back to the Blair Witch Project, VHS. Recently, I watched that. We've reviewed that here on Sports Frenzy. So, of course, I finally got around to watching the latest installment of the Paranormal Activity franchise, again, exclusively on Paramount Plus, Next of Kin. And yes, the luster, the thrill, the originality, the sheen, the shine is off of the found footage genre. So you're never going to really get that full-fledged thrill, that charge, the scares, the absolute pure terror that you got at the end of the Blair Witch Project. Now, I have said the movie itself is mediocre, but the ending of the Blair Witch Project has to be one of the few times, and I'm not trying to be a macho doofus here, I don't get scared that much by watching a movie. Real life is scary enough. Getting on an airplane is scary. But there are 1 or 2 instances where I've jumped or I felt fear watching something in a movie, and I guarantee you, number 1 on my list would have to be the end, the last couple minutes of the Blair Witch Project. So again, maybe that's where my fondness for these found footage movies comes in, is because I am such a cynic. I am very hard on movies. Maybe I really enjoy 1 out of every 3 or 4 I watch, because Hollywood will always let you down with lazy writing, lazy acting, or political correctness. So Paranormal Activity Next of Kin is pretty good, all things considered. Takes place on an isolated Amish farm. Would want to put air quotes around that. As a young woman is trying to find her roots, happens to meet a distant relative from this Amish community. And so it's all arranged that her and her friends, who of course happen to be filming a documentary, are going out to this Amish community to simply film day-to-day life. Right. Right. We all know it's Paranormal Activity. You know that's not the case. Something is going to be going on behind the scenes, something insidious, something diabolical. So again, for what it is effective. If you're a fan of these found footage movies like me, you'll probably enjoy this. If you're not a fan and you just jump in on this isn't actually a bad jumping in point. I don't think you really have to have watched the previous Paranormal Activity movies to really enjoy this as a standalone. But again, you have to buy in to the whole documentary crew found footage idea. So again, not the best of the Paranormal Activity movies, but definitely not the worst. I will give Paranormal Activity on Paramount Plus next of kin 2.5 frenzies. Next week, yeah, Dave and I right now, there's not a lot out there that we can line up, stuff that we want to watch. He's got to worry about his family, his wife and kids, what they want to watch. So I know next week, for me at least, I will finally get around to giving you a review of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, of course, as the latest Marvel movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumanium, debuts this weekend. And once again, of course, we're taping on February the 16th, 2023, and this is hitting Saturday morning as you chug through your third cup of coffee to get over your hangover from Friday, February the 18th, 2023. And once again, Dave's not here. This is usually his moment to shine, but before we move on to movie news and wrap up segment 1, I should let you know that even though you've obviously found us somewhere, you have options. You can find Sports Frenzy 2.0, not only the regular sports edition hitting Thursday morning, but this weekend edition that hits every Saturday morning on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. And of course, check out our Facebook page, which also features links to each and every Sports Frenzy 2.0 podcast episode. All right, as I mentioned, a couple little movie tidbits here to wrap up segment 1. We'll start off with the non-Marvel stuff. Now, of course, recently here at the box office, a modest surprise hit action movie with Gerard Butler, who's turning into the new Liam Neeson, even though Liam Neeson is not gone. I'm actually kind of intrigued by his latest movie, which just opened a few days back, Marlowe. Of course, his take on the classic detective Philip Marlowe, who has been played by Humphrey Bogart, Elliot Gould, James Garner. So, not dismissing Liam Neeson at all, but Gerard Butler is that guy now who's putting out these modestly budgeted, moderately successful action movies. So his latest is Plane, which again did fairly well here recently at the box office, and they have already decided to make a sequel. It doesn't look like Gerard Butler will be in this, but you gotta love the name. The next movie, the follow-up to Plane, will be Ship. So I can't wait for Train, RV, somebody out there, I can't remember on what website it was, had a great, great joke about this where they heard this same little nugget of movie news that I did, and they said, "Oh, these guys missed their opportunity. You should have followed up plane with train and then with automobile." And if you don't get that, I feel sorry for you. After the disastrous performance of Lightyear, where Disney decided, oh, we don't need Tim Allen to voice a younger Buzz Lightyear. We'll bring in Chris Evans, make it politically correct. And of course, it was a miserable, miserable failure. So now news comes out, surprisingly, from Disney that they will be doing Toy Story 5. And yes, Tim Allen will be returning to voice Buzz Lightyear. Take that, cancel culture. All right, I mentioned there's a little bit of Marvel news here. Obviously, not trying to spoil anything, but if you can't deal with this coming out from the head of the Marvel movie division, Kevin Feige, then I don't know what to tell you. It's not a spoiler. It's just, he said it, it's out there. We're going to be getting Captain America, of course, New World Order. I believe we're still a year or two away from that. And of course, if you've seen the Disney Plus series, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you know, Sam Wilson has become Captain America. I don't have a problem with it. I've mentioned this over and over again because that's how it happened in the comic books before this wave of politically correct idiocy overtook our country over the last decade or two. But the interesting thing is, we've talked about William Hurt, of course, the late great William Hurt passing away, and he was in the Marvel Universe as Thunderbolt Ross, primarily the arch nemesis of Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk. But now Thunderbolt Ross's role is going to be expanding in the Marvel Universe. Who plays him? We discussed this as well. Now it will be Harrison Ford playing Thunderbolt Ross, but in Captain America New World Order, Thunderbolt Ross will be president of the United States. Then we've also talked about, of course, his offshoot rogue group, Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad Thunderbolts. And then finally, something that I did not realize, a little bit of casting news, where you can visualize what if things had been different. In the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie, Homecoming, of course, Michael Keaton played the Vulture. But a story just came out where John Leguizamo, who was recently in Violent Night, claims that he was the one set to play the Vulture originally. Sorry, but I think the casting of Michael Keaton works a lot better. I can't see John Leguizamo playing the Vulture. Just can't see it, kids. Sorry. All right, segment 1 is done. Next up, TV and streaming. I'm the Maestro. I will be right back. Hey kids, ready for a blast of dairy goodness? Pick up Sports Frenzy 2.0 milk at your local grocery store. Remember, when you drink Sports Frenzy 2.0 milk, you're not only enjoying a healthy treat, you're helping to locate missing sports heroes of the past and present. Our cartons and jugs feature pictures of Peng Shui, Ryan Leaf, and Sammy Sosa as we do our part to find the lost icons of the last 30 years. And don't forget our special weekend edition chocolate milk containers, available on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, because they feature celebrities like Lindsay Lohan, Helen Hunt, and Jean-Claude Van Damme. Pick up a gallon today. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Sports Frenzy 2.0. Segment 2 this week with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Flying solo, as I mentioned in segment 1. As always, music gets in the way. But that's good for you because next week, as I previously announced, finally, maybe a harbinger of spring coming, a concert the Conquistador and I will review for you next week. Alter Bridge, Mammoth, WVH got in the way of the taping schedule, so you're stuck with me and me alone this week, but that's okay. And I want to pump things up a little bit. I know that first segment was a little bit dull because everything, the 3 songs I reviewed, the movie I reviewed, were all okay, good but not great. Now, I can't say the things I'm going to talk about here, the one show I'm going to review here in TV and streaming, are going to make things much better, but I'm going to make an effort to be more energetic, despite the fact that, again, probably not the best reviews or news in the world when it comes to TV and streaming. And then, of course, we're going to set aside some time, possibly even the last half of this segment, to review all of the Super Bowl ads. Now, I went to school for marketing and advertising, so I take more of an interest in this stuff than most of you, and I look at this differently than most of you do. And the opinions I've seen so far across the media post Super Bowl have been wide ranging in terms of, it seems like this person liked this ad, another person hates it. Vice versa. I mean, it's just crazy. And then I fit in along with everybody else where some of these things, some of these messages, some of these ads I liked, some of them I didn't. And it seems to just contradict what other people in the media are saying. So we'll get to that. But with TV and streaming, of course, Dave and I have been discussing over the last few weeks The Last of Us. Of course, hit series on HBO Max, based on the big PlayStation video game. And if you've been following our discussions, our reviews over the last few weeks, we're right now through episode 5 as we tape here on the 16th of February, 2023. I don't see this one being in my viewing schedule for that much longer, if at all. It is such a blatant carbon copy of The Walking Dead. There's honestly nothing about this show that stands out to me. Now, am I saying it's terrible? No. It's fine, it's serviceable, but when there's so much content out there to watch, The Last of Us, just for me at least, doesn't really cut it. If I want to watch The Walking Dead, I'll watch The Walking Dead. I've still got 2 seasons at the end to catch up on because I pretty much started to fade out once they got rid of Rick Grimes. But The Last of Us, again, feel free to comment on our podcast page or comment on our Facebook page. Let me know what you think, because I really don't see any reason to keep watching this. Between the politically correct writing, which we all know is leaking and bleeding into almost every show nowadays, it's just, again, such a blatant redo of The Walking Dead. You tell me what you're seeing in this that is so much different from The Walking Dead. So maybe next week we'll talk about episode 6. Maybe it's off the slate completely. Now, one show that I am enjoying beyond belief is Poker Face on Peacock. Now, since new episodes drop on Thursdays, it's a little tricky as I review here today. The new episode 7, just dropped. Haven't watched it yet. By the time this gets out there Saturday morning, of course, you guys have had a chance to watch episode 7. I'm through 6. Of course, episode 6 was fantastic, as they've all been so far. Episode 6, of course, features the great Ellen Barkin. She is such a great bad actress. And I mean that as a compliment. I really do. Going back to Animal Kingdom, when she played Smurf, the matriarch of the family of criminals, one of my favorite shows of all time. She's not a great pure actress, but for what she does, and sometimes going over the top, she's awesome. She's just fun to watch, for better, for worse. And of course, SNL's Tim Meadows is in this latest episode as well. It all involves community theater. It's great. Poker Face is great. I cannot wait till we get done. Well, let me stop myself right there. I don't want it to end. Good news is we've still got a few episodes left. Loving Poker Face. Cannot wait, what I wanted to say, to be able to give you a full review of the entire first season. But I am not wishing it away. I don't want it to end. So there you go. There's your first absolute positive review / declarative statement of this episode. Poker Face. Check out Poker Face. Now, finally, I had to, again, play catch up a little bit here. This is a review that Dave wouldn't normally partake in because he doesn't have Disney Plus. I recently got it back again. And of course, I mentioned in the first segment, I will be reviewing Black Panther: Wakanda Forever next week in our movie segment. But finally got to watch, yes, it's well after Christmas, but finally sat down and watched the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special on Disney Plus. Is it perfect? Is it awesome? Is it fun beyond belief? Not really. I wouldn't go that far. Is it charming? Whimsical? Yeah, it is. It is. There are one or two laugh out loud moments. I think some people are confused. I've heard at least one person, if not a couple, ask me about, is it animated? And of course, no, this is not animated except for the first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes. Otherwise, it's all live action, and it includes all of the Guardians of the Galaxy that you guys know and love from the first two movies. And by now, you know, if you've seen any of the trailers, you know that this involves a bizarre quest to give Kevin Bacon, the actor, as a Christmas present to Peter Quill, Star-Lord. So that in and of itself, that premise should make you smile a little bit. The execution, again, good but not great. And as we'll talk about when we get to the Super Bowl ads, it leads into the hype for hopefully the rebound movie here in the latest group of Marvel movies, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Coming out here early summer 2023. Now, I like to keep you guys informed, updated on what's going on with your bills when it comes to your streaming services, what's being pulled off, what's coming in the future. Those of you who have Comcast, internet, or television have been enjoying Peacock Premium at no additional cost. I'm a cord cutter. I have YouTube TV, so I pay the $5 a month so I can have my WWE access, as well as, again, watching stuff like Poker Face and the Universal movies once they get out of that theatrical window. But now you guys are going to have to pay the same as I do, because starting on June the 26th, Comcast television and internet customers will no longer get Peacock Premium for free. Now, supposedly you're going to get some kind of a discount when you're dealing with a $5 a month service. I don't know what kind of discount Comcast is going to give you. Maybe you'll get it for $2 or $3 a month. But I will admit, now I'm a wrestling guy. You guys know that. So $5 a month is well worth it for me for Peacock Premium. But there, again, you got Poker Face, Killing It at some point is going to come back with season 2. Again, you get the Universal movies a couple months after they debut in the theaters. Peacock is definitely, in my opinion, gaining steam, becoming one of the better streaming services out there. Now, speaking of one that I am not a fan of, which I actually, just before I started taping, canceled my service. We're going to have more news on this service next week on Sports Frenzy, the weekend edition. But Showtime had a series about, have you ever watched the great classic movie The Talented Mr. Ripley with Matt Damon, Gwyneth Paltrow, Jude Law? Well, that character, of course, comes from literary roots. The author is I'm 99% sure Patricia Highsmith. So that character, they've been trying to bring Ripley back. And finally, they had a series all set up at Showtime simply called Ripley. Well, because of what's going on with Paramount and Showtime and all of these streaming companies cutting content costs, which I think is just going to end up really hurting all of these providers, all of these hubs in the end. This Ripley series will move now from Showtime to Netflix. And of course, the character, if you're not aware of the character, is kind of a con man. Very interesting character. I would encourage you to watch The Talented Mr. Ripley. And I'm kind of happy. Again, I canceled Showtime here today. Paramount Plus and Showtime. Sorry, Showtime to me has got to be the worthless premium streaming channel access of all of them. Got to be the most worthless. So now that this is going to Netflix, much more interested. Definitely know I'll be able to watch it when it hits Netflix. And then we talked about The Terminal List. I believe it was a couple weeks ago. The series starring Chris Pratt on Amazon Prime. Personally, I gave up on it. Initially, it didn't hold my interest after an episode, but that one got renewed for season 2. Another one, the exact same viewing pattern for me, was The Peripheral. Watched the first episode and a half, just didn't really quite hold my interest. Again, neither one of these shows, The Terminal List or The Peripheral, were bad, but there's only so many hours in a day now with so many more viewing options, just didn't grab me and hold me. Well, now I got to worry about possibly going back and watching season 1 of The Peripheral, because The Peripheral has been renewed, just like The Terminal List, for season 2 at Amazon Prime. Now, I'm always curious here, wrapping up before I get into my ranting and raving about the Super Bowl ads, about the contracts outside of Disney that Marvel still has floating around out there. And yes, we all know that's primarily Spider-Man, and that's primarily Sony. But along with the news that The Peripheral had been renewed for a second season at Amazon Prime, as a little throw-off nugget, at the end of the story I read, Spider-Man Noir looks to be in development at Amazon Prime. Now again, Spider-Man, Sony's been able to keep a lock on that character and all of the ancillary villains and other characters in the Spider-Man universe. So I find it interesting that Spider-Man Noir can now shift over to Amazon. I would assume that because Sony still has that Spider-Man character under control, they can do this. And of course, Sony is the one major movie studio that does not have a direct tie to their own streaming service. So you wonder why they're not setting up something, a Sony Plus, a Columbia Pictures Plus. We know Universal goes directly to Peacock. Warner Brothers goes directly to HBO Max. Paramount, obviously, to Paramount Plus. So this whole situation with Marvel, Spider-Man, Sony, Columbia, very interesting. All right. Time for me to pull out my college education. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the segment, I have a degree in marketing, wanted to get into advertising, but as so many young people do, and I am saying this with all due empathy and respect, we should not be forced to decide our career paths when we're 20 or 21 years old. Because I graduated, realized I didn't want to live in New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. And that pretty much meant there was no way in holy hell I was going to get into advertising. But I still notice things I think that other people really don't when it comes to advertising. I know some of the basic tenets of what makes a good ad, what makes a bad ad. And believe it or not, bad ads can actually be good, which I will explain in a minute. But of course, the Super Bowl is not only the penultimate, the best of the best, the greatest game for football, but it is the top tier, the biggest showcase for advertisers. Now, maybe it's because I'm older, look back more fondly at Super Bowls from 10, 15, 20 years ago and think about how the ads were better. Maybe it's because I'm getting bitter as I get older and don't like the PC garbage, don't like the woke stuff. And again, looking at my background, I don't like the woke PC stuff because you are going to alienate a lot of your audience when you do this. But this is going to be kind of a 5-minute stream of consciousness. I've got my list in front of me, made notes while I was watching the Super Bowl. Thank God for the pause button and the DVR. So when Rihanna came on, I could fast forward through that and get back up to real time. Now, I mentioned the PC stuff. I will get that out of the way real quick, get the negativity, the massive negativity out of the way real quick. McDonald's, shame on you. A blatant, woke, politically correct commercial early on in the Super Bowl broadcast, which again, people are sick of. And it amazes me. It amazes me how McDonald's, for as popular and iconic of a brand as they are, put out the worst commercials, especially again over the last 10 or 20 years. They put out the worst, lamest, most pathetic commercials of any major corporation in America. And I guess this is an example of why spend the money when you're already so ingrained in the consumer's consciousness that you don't really have to worry about it. Disney, of course, had their PC moment with their 100th anniversary commercial. Not quite as bad as McDonald's, but still. Just look at the people who are cast in the commercials. Whether it's blatant like in the McDonald's ad or whether it's a little more subtle like in the Disney 100 ad. And tell me if things have not gone completely 180. The pendulum has swung one way completely from where it was 30 or 40 years ago to the other way. Pepsi Zero, those commercials, first one with Ben Stiller, second one with Steve Martin. I saw people like those. They were awful. They were stupid. They were terrible. And I still don't understand. I don't know anybody in my group of friends who thinks Zoolander is a funny movie, yet they still dredge up the whole Blue Steel thing. Ben Affleck at Dunkin' Donuts. I thought that was fun. I dreaded seeing the Michelob Ultra commercials that I knew were coming, playing off Caddyshack. Didn't turn out to be as bad as I thought they were going to be. They kept the Tony Romo as Carl Spackler stuff to a minimum. Probably my personal favorite, well, let's say one of my two or three personal favorites, was the Busch Light commercial with Sarah McLachlan, where it tries to shift gears and confuse you, yet keep you involved and keep your mind working. Kind of like what the very interesting Coors Light, Miller Lite, Blue Moon commercial did. The Busch Light commercial looks like it's going to be one of those typical Busch Light man commercials, and then of course it shifts and it turns into looks like a namby-pamby, almost PETA-esque commercial. And then of course the tables get turned at the end with Sarah McLachlan realizing she's in a tent with a wolf. The other one I liked that stood out to me was the Dodge Ram Rev commercials about premature electrification. Yes, childish, silly, ridiculous sexual innuendos, but I thought we needed some of that childish, immature humor to offset all the stupidity and the wokeness. And speaking of which, I cannot finish this segment without discussing the idiocy, the absolute idiocy of what M&M Mars is doing with the M&Ms commercials. I hated the pathetic woke commercials that they did with the candy spokespeople, with the guy with the branches and the ivy tattooed on his face, and the mime in the office. So then they go with the ridiculous, idiotic Maya Rudolph commercials where, oh, she's taking over the brand now. And they're going to call them Manyas and fill them with clams. Ha, ha, ha. Who's laughing at that? And now, of course, what have they done? They bring back the candy spokespeople in some kind of big, huge reveal during the Super Bowl. And now, the first commercial I've seen since then, they're going back to being a woke PC garbage. And now the packages on M&Ms will feature women that matter. Get over this crap. Can we all just go back to being one people, one nation, one culture? Stop dividing us. Stop it. As bad as the M&M's commercials were, the dumbest had to be Bud Light. And again, I saw people out there who like this. I don't get it. Miles Teller, of course, now living off his newfound massive fame from being in Top Gun Maverick, dancing around his house with his hot wife while she's on hold with somebody at some service center. What? I gotta waste my time on this? There's no humor in it. Why do I want to watch them dance around to on hold music? Hellman's Mayonnaise. Oh, get it? John Hamm and Brie Larson. And then, of course, we've got to throw in the overrated idiot of all time, Pete Davidson, Awful, awful stuff. The Doritos triangles with Jack Harlow, who I don't even freaking know. And then, of course, throw in Elton John at the end. Awful. The Kia commercial with the Binky Dad. Awful. Tubi with the rabbits. Awful. T-Mobile with Bradley Cooper and his mom. Awful. But to close out segment 2, I will say this. The follow-up T-Mobile commercial with John Travolta singing Grease songs with Zach Braff, very good. All right, kids, dumbasses and moments of silence coming up next. In the fortress of solitary justice, 2 brave men hold the fate of the sports world in their hands. With the utterance of a single word, frenzy! These seemingly ordinary men become the Maestro and the Conquistador, destined to save the world from stupidity on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Apple, and all noble podcast hosts everywhere. Dave and Kev stand for truth, justice, and the frenzy way. All right, everybody. Third and final segment here, weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0 with the Maestro. Taping here on February the 16th, 2023. This will hit, of course, Saturday morning, the 18th. Your hangover cure. I do want to follow up with a couple last remarks about the Super Bowl ads. Of course, I went through a lot of them as quickly as I could in the last segment, but still didn't have enough time to give you a full recap. So let me point out number 1. The movie trailers, the movie ads, for the most part, were very mediocre. A few of them more interesting than the others. And of course, the thing is, they're only going to give you 30-second or 60-second bites of these movies. So I understand it, but it still kind of infuriates me where half of these go online to see the full trailer. I get it. Now, we have talked about on Sports Frenzy 2.0, the Conquistador and I, about our disdain for Ezra Miller, the actor who's playing the Flash, as the DC movie universe goes through this massive change with James Gunn taking over. But he, of course, has said that the Flash, the movie coming out here in the next few months, will actually be a pivotal moment, a pivot point. He's not dismissing this like he's pretty much dismissing Shazam, Fury of the Gods, or the next Aquaman movie. So the Flash could end up being a very interesting moment for the DC movie universe, kind of like the last Spider-Man movie was for Marvel. And of course, if you saw the Super Bowl ad for the Flash, you saw Michael Keaton appearing again as Batman. You also saw Michael Shannon as Zod from Man of Steel. So you kind of get where I'm going here if you're a comic book movie geek like me. So the question is, will this really end up being a massive hit for DC and turning their fortunes around? We shall see. Now, I will say that along with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 were the 2 best. But again, they've already got me. Fast 10. Those movies can go either way. I've watched all of them. It depends on how crazy they go with the stunts and the scenarios. if they can kind of keep them somewhat grounded in some semblance of reality. Fast 10 could be very good with Jason Momoa now, of course, Aquaman as the primary villain. Transformers, I could care less. Indiana Jones 5, The Dial of Destiny, just looks embarrassing. And I was a huge fan of the first three Indiana Jones movies, but when they waited and waited and waited and then put out the fourth one, where Indiana Jones hides in a refrigerator to escape a nuclear blast, that is called Fonzie jumping the shark. So I don't have a lot of hope for The Dial of Destiny. Creed 3, I'm looking forward to it. I like the Rocky Creed movies. I don't know what kind of mass appeal it will have, although the first two Creed movies did fairly well, but this one does not have Stallone in it, so we'll see. And finally, let me just point this out as one last comment on all of the advertising this year for the Super Bowl. Now, I will say this. Looking at it as a whole, I thought this year was a lot better than what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. There were enough positives. Again, for me, as somebody who went to school for this, I saw enough positives, enough humor, enough bright spots. But let me tell you this. Personally, could you please take Tony Romo and Snoop Dogg and stick them up Madison Avenue's ass? Because I can't stand those two in any more of my commercials. I don't want to see them anymore. I don't understand how they've become so relatable. Tony Romo, Snoop Dogg, go the fuck away. And that being said, we'll have to pivot. Our moments of silence, of course, who we've lost this past week in the world of pop culture and entertainment. Of course, the great Burt Bacharach, legendary songwriter. Worked a lot with Carol Bayer Sager. I'm not going to do your homework for you if you want to look up the hit songs that Burt Bacharach was involved with. Depends on your age. I will say, of course, the one song that stands out above all others for Burt Bacharach is from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. An outstanding classic song. Thoughts and prayers to the family and the friends of Burt Bacharach. And then real quick here, we ridicule the Oscars because, honestly, out of the movies that the Academy picks, chooses, votes for Best Picture each and every year, as we go back through time, maybe once every 5 or 6 years, one of those movies actually does stand out in our culture, in our pop consciousness, and becomes what we end up looking at as a classic. And this was not one of those movies. I'm sorry. But at the time is probably known more for its music. Vangelis the theme song from Chariots of Fire. But the director of that movie, Hugh Hudson, passed away here recently. Honestly, do you know anybody who watched Chariots of Fire? I didn't. Then finally, one of the few rap bands that I could tolerate, that I could put up with, that I could withstand, was De La Soul. And one of their founding members, David, I'm going to botch this last name and I apologize, Jolicoeur, passed away. I remember Me, Myself, and I from De La Soul. I remember I loved that song back in the day. All right, again, to pivot from mournfulness, from sorrow, into railing on stupidity. Each and every week we do it here in the last segment, not only on our regular sports-focused Sports Frenzy episode Thursday morning, but here on the weekend edition, it is once again time for the Red Forum and Dumb Asses of the Week. Got 5 for you this week. Now, we mark this broadcast, this podcast, as explicit for a reason. There are weeks where we might only drop an F-bomb once. But there are other weeks where we will get profane and disgusting and nasty. Again, we always give you fair warning, whether it's really PG-13 or a hard R. We always say Sports Frenzy 2.0 is explicit because Dave and I try to use this as a cathartic experience for us to vent, to rant, to rave, to get our anger about society and the idiocy of whether it's sports or entertainment out. We try to kind of be your soundboard. We try to say the things that maybe you don't get to, because we frankly don't care what cancel culture thinks of us. And as we always say, we don't apologize for the things we say because we damn sure mean them. So that huge precursor leads me into my first Red Foreman dumbass of the week. And there are multiple dumbasses technically involved here. Now, anybody with half a brain who's read a good book, a classic, and we all got dragged through the mud when we were kids and we had to read Jane Eyre or The Red Badge of Courage, whatever the book might have been. But if you liked one of them, one or two of them, you've got some semblance of brain matter. Now, unfortunately, people like you and I, we have been subjected here for the longest time to the idiocy of the Kardashians. And yes, we all know Kim is pretty. One of the few human beings on the face of the earth where plastic surgery worked out perfectly for her. But she's not the dumbass of the week. Kourtney Kardashian, partially. I got to weave my web here, tell you a little tale. Kourtney Kardashian is under fire for putting out, I guess she has a line of vitamins. Well, her latest vitamin, and I am giving you a quote here, vaginal wellness gummies. Now, of course, the advertising behind this, yes, this episode seems to come back to advertising. Again, parental guidance, strongly advised here for the next couple minutes. These gummies that Kourtney Kardashian is putting out, that she's advertising, supposedly make your vaginal juices sweeter, less smelly than they would be normally. Now, that in and of itself could probably warrant a Dumbass of the Week award. But the story I read actually went further, and they started talking to female gynecologists about the merits of these claims for Kourtney Kardashian's vaginal wellness gummies. Now, the gynecologist interviewed also merit consideration for the Red Foreman Dumbass of the Week award. Not because they were saying, well, there's no way these work. The ingredients, the vitamins involved, there's no guarantee they're going to do what Miss Kardashian says they're going to do. But these gynecologists have to turn it all around and somehow make it about how these gummies are offensive because they are another sign of the patriarchy overtaking women's health. Because again, listener beware, the fact that these gummies make the vaginal juices sweeter and better tasting is bowing down to men because it will make oral sex more pleasurable for them. Yikes. I can't believe I've just been talking about this for almost 5 minutes. But can you blame me? This is just a round table of stupidity and dumbassery. This would have been a situation better left alone. We didn't need vaginal wellness gummies, and we didn't need these gynecologists turning it into some kind of a political statement about hating men. Dumbasses all around. All right, so let's get away from the detailed sexual explicit stuff. Let's go back to kids. Kid shows. We all look fondly back at our childhoods and remember the cartoons or the shows that we loved when we were growing up. Whether it was, for me, something like the Banana Splits, Thundar the Barbarian. You know, I wasn't really into the namby-pamby stuff. I was the Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes type of guy, Little Rascals, best ever. But more recently, over the last couple decades, I think Pee Wee Herman, Pee Wee's Playhouse was the last great quote-unquote kids show. Yes, we know there was a lot of subtle adult humor in there. But ever since then, I mean, the stuff they've put out on Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, some people out there I know are screaming SpongeBob, that's fine. But did anybody ever like Barney? Did anybody ever really want to watch Barney with their kids? I love you, you love me. Shoot me in the head before it's 3. Oh, God. Guess what? Barney's coming back. In an absolute dumbass move when we thought that we had gotten rid of Barney forever. Barney will be relaunching in 2024 across multiple media platforms. God help us all. We have talked about the idiot show of the year, the dumbass show of the year. Even though we're only in February of 2023, Velma. This sick, stupid, pathetic relaunch of Scooby-Doo on HBO Max with the overrated, overhyped Mindy Kaling in charge. Last time I checked, even after multiple episodes had aired, Velma was ranked as the third worst television show of all time. Of all time by IMDb. Yet somehow it gets renewed for season 2, and right around the time that they get their renewal, they make an absolutely pathetic, awful, dumbass joke about sickle cell. I don't know what more I can say about this. We've talked about it on past episodes. This idea by Mindy Kaling, again, she's an idiot. I don't care if she's a minority. I don't care if she's a woman. She's an idiot. Again, we don't apologize here. We call everybody out. Male, female, white, black, LGBTQ. If you're an idiot, if you're a dumbass, we will call you out. And Mindy Kaling is a dumbass. And this whole idea with Velma, dumbass, and now to make fun of people with sickle cell. I know they don't directly make fun of people with the disease, but still, you don't do this. Mindy Kaling, Velma, HBO Max, you're all dumbasses. Now, going back in time again, we talked about the cartoons that we grew up with Saturday mornings after school, looking back fondly at past memories. You guys remember the great classic comedy Splash with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah? Well, of course, everything's fair game nowadays. So even though it's been gestating since 2016, yes, 7 years, word has come out that Disney is moving forward with a remake of Splash featuring, can you believe this, Jillian Bell taking over the role of the mermaid. I know. I get it. We can't body shame. It's all inclusive now. I'm surprised they didn't get Lizzo to play the mermaid. I think Lizzo could have been better because then they really could have turned the whole thing on its head. In some way, that makes more sense to me than this, where this seems just kind of like a half-ass. We can't have a pretty blonde girl per se playing the mermaid in Splash, so let's find a chunky, barely talented comedian to play the mermaid. It's a dumbass move. Again, I should be running Hollywood. If we're going to go all the way, I'm serious, and I'm not trying to say this to denigrate Lizzo. I think her as the mermaid, you could have turned this whole thing on its head and just gone 180. And I think I would have had more respect for it because then it's a full-blown parody. But this half-ass stuff with Jillian Bell, dumbass move. Then finally, was going to talk about this in the music segment, but decided to save it for the dumbasses of the week. You guys know how I feel about Live Nation and Ticketmaster and the blatant, corrupt monopoly that they have over concert tickets, as well as sporting event tickets. We've talked about Taylor Swift. We've talked about Bruce Springsteen. The most recent examples of how Live Nation and Ticketmaster cannot handle massive ticket sales without either botching it completely or overcharging and gouging the consumer. Now, there are a lot of lawsuits out there going after Live Nation and Ticketmaster. The government's trying to get involved, but we all know how that's going to work out considering it's our government. But I'm going to call out a member of the judicial community, Judge Danny J. Boggs, an appeals court judge. This guy, I don't know if this could be the first time ever outside of the president or somebody in Congress we have called out a public official as a dumbass. Judge Danny J. Boggs can go to hell. He is already in the front for me in terms of nominations for Dumbass of the Year. Danny J. Boggs shot down one of these lawsuits on appeal filed against Ticketmaster and Live Nation. Now, we all know the multiple problems we've got with Ticketmaster and Live Nation, the exorbitant fees, the monopoly, the vertical monopoly that Live Nation holds, since they own a lot of these venues that they're selling tickets for. You guys are going to love this. You guys are going to love this, and I mean that sarcastically. Judge Boggs decided to dismiss an appeal on one of these lawsuits because, well, as a user, you clicked on agreeing to the terms and conditions. So therefore, and ergo, Live Nation and Ticketmaster hold no further liability. The point is they're a monopoly. You either choose to buy the tickets or don't choose to buy the tickets to them. For this idiot to say, well, you clicked on the terms and conditions and agreed to them. So you're basically telling everybody you can either fall in line and kiss the ass of the monopoly known as Live Nation and Ticketmaster, or you can choose to not go to concerts and take a big chunk of your life away. For somebody like me telling me I can't go to a concert unless I kiss Live Nation's ass, that's not a clear judicial decision. That's stupidity. It's a vertical monopoly. I know more about this supposedly based on this decision than Judge Danny J. Boggs does. We're asking for more options, competition in the ticket environment, the ticket selling business place, so that they have to keep their costs reasonable. That's all we're asking for. $5 fees instead of $20 per ticket fees. Get rid of dynamic pricing like we had to suffer through with Bruce Springsteen. Better infrastructure than what we had to deal with the Taylor Swift debacle. Danny J. Boggs sounds like he could barely serve me at McDonald's, let alone run a court of law, because he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand. Yes, we did click the terms of service. We agreed to them because we had no choice. That's the problem. It's a monopoly. A monopoly gives you no choice. You either take the service or you don't take the service. That's not competition. in a free market environment. There should be other options. If I want to buy tickets for a concert, I should have 3 or 4 options, not secondary market options. If I want to buy a car, guess what? I can go to a Dodge dealership. I can go to a Kia dealership. I can go to a Toyota dealership. And I can make an informed choice based on research, driving the cars, test driving them. I don't have to buy from one dealership and buy one make or one model. That's what drives me crazy about politicians and stupid judges like Danny J. Boggs. All right, sorry, I did go off on a rant there, but you guys know how I feel about it. Next week, of course, Alter Bridge, Mammoth WVH, our review. Live in Indianapolis. Music from the Carburetors, Black Star Riders, LA Guns. And of course, I also mentioned Black Panther Wakanda Forever. The Conquistador will be back next week. Thanks for hanging out with me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care. I'm the Maestro. We'll talk to you next week.